pop singer Michael Jackson has died. Jackson was not breathing when paramedics arrived at his home after a 911 call.
3 days before his death, Michael Jackson made a phone call that was secretly recorded. What he said on that call has never been fully released to the public. The few fragments that leaked out painted a picture so disturbing that investigators tried to bury it. He talked about being watched, about people who wanted him gone, about a plan he couldn't escape. This wasn't paranoia. Michael Jackson knew exactly what was coming for him. If you're watching this, hit subscribe. I break down the most disturbing mysteries the world tried to forget. You don't want to miss what's coming next. Michael Joseph Jackson was born on August 29, 1969, in Gary, Indiana, the 8th of 10 children in a working-class family living in a tiny 2-bedroom house. His father, Joe Jackson, worked at a steel mill and played guitar in a local R&B band called the Falcons. Joe saw his children as his ticket out of poverty, and he pushed them relentlessly. By the time Michael was 5 years old, he was already performing with his older brothers, rehearsing for hours after school while other kids played outside. The Jackson 5 signed with Motown Records in 1968, and by 1969, they had their first #1 hit with I Want You Back. Michael was 11 years old. He wasn't just talented, he was extraordinary. His voice had a clarity and emotion that seasoned performers spent lifetimes trying to achieve. But that talent came with a cost. Joe Jackson's discipline was legendary, and not in a good way. He would sit in a chair with a belt in his hand during rehearsals, ready to strike if anyone made a mistake. Michael later said he was so terrified of his father that he would sometimes vomit before performances. There were stories that went even darker. Michael claimed Joe would come into his room late at night, tapping on the window to scare him, testing whether he was alert enough to defend himself. Joe called it preparation for the real world. Michael called it torture. He grew up afraid, unable to trust, always performing, never allowed to just be a kid. His childhood wasn't stolen. It was systematically dismantled and replaced with a machine designed to entertain the world. By the time he went solo in the early 1970s, the pressure only intensified. His 1979 album, Off the Wall, sold over 20 million copies worldwide. But it was Thriller in 1982 that turned him into something beyond a pop star. He became a cultural phenomenon. Thriller is still the best-selling album of all time, with over 70 million copies sold. The music video revolutionized the industry, turning MTV into a powerhouse and proving that a black artist could dominate a white-controlled medium. Michael Jackson wasn't just making music, he was reshaping the entire entertainment landscape. But with that level of success came scrutiny that would haunt him for the rest of his life. The media couldn't get enough of him, and when there wasn't a story, they created one. His changing appearance became tabloid obsession. Vitiligo, a skin condition that destroys pigmentation, turned his brown skin lighter over the years. Instead of understanding, the world mocked him. Rumors about plastic surgery, about sleeping in hyperbaric chambers, about trying to buy the Elephant Man's bones. None of it was true, but it didn't matter. The narrative was set. Michael Jackson was weird, and weird sold papers. Then came the allegations that would define the rest of his life. In 1993, a 13-year-old boy named Jordan Chandler accused Michael of sexual abuse. The story broke like a bomb. Jordan's father, Evan Chandler, was a dentist with Hollywood ambitions and a history of trying to profit off his son's connection to Michael. Evan had been recorded on tape saying he had a plan that would destroy Michael Jackson and make him wealthy in the process. That recording was never allowed as evidence in court, but it painted a picture of a father willing to weaponize his own son for money. The details of the case were murky from the start. Jordan's story changed multiple times. There were inconsistencies in his timeline, in his descriptions, in the very foundation of his claims. But the media didn't care about inconsistencies. They cared about headlines. Michael Jackson, the biggest star on the planet, was accused of the most heinous crime imaginable. The coverage was relentless, brutal, and one-sided. Michael maintained his innocence, but his lawyers and his record label, Sony, pressured him to settle. A trial would drag on for years, destroy his career, and expose him to a media circus that would make the current coverage look tame. So in January 1994, Michael agreed to pay the Chandler family a reported $23 million. The settlement included a confidentiality clause, meaning Jordan couldn't speak publicly about the case. But here's the critical part. The settlement was only for the civil case. Jordan and his father could have still pursued criminal charges. They chose not to. The Los Angeles District Attorney's Office conducted a 13-month investigation and found insufficient evidence to file charges. Michael Jackson was never criminally charged in the Chandler case, but the damage was done. To the public, the settlement looked like an admission of guilt. Why would an innocent man pay $23 million? The answer is complicated. Michael was in the middle of his Dangerous World Tour, performing to sold-out stadiums across the globe. Canceling the tour would have cost him and his promoters tens of millions of dollars. His image was already being destroyed daily in the press. And the legal advice he received was unanimous: settle, move on, rebuild. So he did. But moving on proved impossible. The settlement became proof of guilt in the court of public opinion, a stain that no amount of acquittals or evidence could ever wash away. A decade later, in 2003, another boy came forward. Gavin Arvizo accused Michael of abuse during a period when he and his family had been guests at Neverland Ranch. Gavin was a cancer survivor who Michael had befriended and supported through his treatment. But according to Gavin and his mother, that friendship turned into something sinister. This time, there would be no settlement. The Santa Barbara District Attorney, Tom Sneddon, had been pursuing Michael for years, ever since the Chandler case slipped through his fingers. Sneddon saw this as his second chance. The case went to trial in 2005. The trial was a media spectacle. Cameras weren't allowed in the courtroom, but that didn't stop the coverage. Every day, reporters lined up outside the courthouse in Santa Maria, California, analyzing every movement, every facial expression, every rumor. The prosecution presented a case built on the testimony of Gavin Arvizo and his family, but under cross-examination, the case fell apart. The prosecution's case relied heavily on the testimony of the accuser's family, but under cross-examination, serious credibility issues emerged. The family had a documented history that raised questions. They had previously been involved in a civil lawsuit that resulted in a settlement, and inconsistencies in their current testimony became a central focus of the defense strategy. The timeline presented by the prosecution also faced challenges. The alleged incidents were said to have occurred after a controversial documentary aired in which Michael discussed his relationship with children. The defense argued that the timing didn't align with other evidence, including records and witness statements that contradicted key elements of the prosecution's narrative. Multiple witnesses provided testimony that challenged the foundation of the case, and the defense systematically presented evidence that raised reasonable doubt. After 5 months of testimony, the jury deliberated for 7 days. On June 13, 2005, they returned a verdict, not guilty on all 14 counts. Michael Jackson was acquitted. But the victory felt hollow. His reputation was in ruins. The trial had cost him over $30 million in legal fees. His health had deteriorated. He had lost weight, developed insomnia, and become dependent on prescription medications to cope with the stress. Neverland, the place he called his sanctuary, was raided by over 70 police officers during the investigation. They tore through his home, his belongings, his most private spaces. He never lived there again. After the trial, he couldn't even look at the place without feeling violated. Michael retreated from the public eye after the trial. He moved to Bahrain, then Ireland, then back to the United States, but he never truly settled. He was a man without a home, living in rented mansions, constantly moving, always looking over his shoulder. The man who once filled stadiums with 100,000 screaming fans was now a recluse. He spent his time with his 3 children, Prince, Paris, and Blanket, shielding them from the world that had chewed him up and spit him out. By 2009, Michael was facing financial collapse. His Neverland Ranch, the sprawling estate that once symbolized his fantasy world, was on the verge of foreclosure. He owed hundreds of millions of dollars. His spending habits, his legal battles, and years of being unable to tour had drained his fortune. That's when AEG Live approached him with an offer, a series of comeback concerts in London called This Is It, 50 shows at the O2 Arena. It would pay off his debts, rebuild his legacy, and prove to the world that he was still the king of pop. Michael didn't want to do it. Friends and family members have said he was exhausted, physically and mentally. He was 50 years old, and his body had been through decades of punishing dance routines, surgeries, and stress. But the pressure was overwhelming. AEG had already sold out all 50 shows. The tickets brought in over $85 million. Backing out wasn't an option. The contracts were signed. The machine was in motion, and Michael Jackson was trapped. Rehearsals for This Is It began in April 2009 at the Forum in Inglewood, California, before moving to the Staples Center in Los Angeles. From the very first day, there were warning signs that something was seriously wrong. Michael showed up thin, gaunt, almost skeletal. His weight had dropped to around 120 pounds on a 5'9" frame. His skin was pale, almost translucent. He wore multiple layers of clothing, even in warm rehearsal spaces, constantly complaining about being cold. He missed rehearsals frequently. When he did show up, he was often late, sometimes by hours. During rehearsals, he would lose focus, stare off into space, or struggle to remember choreography he had performed thousands of times before. Travis Payne, one of the choreographers, later said there were moments when Michael seemed completely disconnected, like his mind was somewhere else entirely. Kenny Ortega, the director and choreographer for the tour, grew increasingly alarmed. On June 19, 2009, just 6 days before Michael's death, Ortega sent an email to Randy Phillips, the CEO of AEG Live. The email was blunt. He was a basket case, and Kenny was concerned he would embarrass himself on stage, or worse yet, get hurt. The company is rehearsing right now, but the doubt is pervasive. Another email from Ortega described Michael as appearing lost, cold, and frightened. Ortega wrote that Michael needed psychological help, that something was profoundly wrong, and that forcing him to continue in this state was dangerous. AEG's response was not to get Michael help. It was to bring in Dr. Conrad Murray to a meeting and make it clear that the show must go on. Paul Gongaware, an AEG executive, sent an email to Murray on June 20th that read, "We want to remind him that it is AEG, not MJ, who is paying your salary. We want to remind him what is expected of him." The message was clear. Murray's job wasn't to protect Michael's health. It was to make sure Michael could perform. Dr. Conrad Murray had been hired in May 2009 at Michael's request. Michael wanted a personal physician to travel with him to London, and he specifically asked for Murray, a cardiologist who had treated him before. But Murray was in financial trouble. He had child support payments, mortgages on multiple properties, and a struggling practice. AEG offered him $150,000 a month, far more than he was making as a doctor. It was an offer he couldn't refuse. But the arrangement was unusual. Murray wasn't being paid by Michael directly. He was being paid by AEG, creating a conflict of interest that would prove fatal. Murray began administering propofol to Michael in late May, shortly after being hired. Propofol is a powerful anesthetic used in surgeries. It's administered intravenously and requires constant monitoring because it can suppress breathing and stop the heart. It's never meant to be used outside of a hospital setting, and it's absolutely never meant to be used as a sleep aid. But Michael called it his milk and insisted it was the only thing that could help him sleep. He had been using it on and off for years during previous tours, always with a doctor present. But this time was different. Murray was giving him propofol almost every night in Michael's bedroom, with no proper monitoring equipment, no backup medical staff, and no safety protocols. Michael Jackson suffered from chronic insomnia. The pressure, the pain, the memories, they kept him awake. He called propofol his milk because of its white appearance. He believed it was the only thing that could give him rest. But propofol doesn't produce natural sleep. It induces a state closer to unconsciousness. Without proper monitoring, it can stop your breathing. It can stop your heart. And on June 25th, 2009, that's exactly what happened. But before that final night, Michael made a phone call. It was recorded, though the full recording has never been made public. Only fragments have leaked, and those fragments are chilling. Michael's voice, slurred and barely coherent, talked about being watched. He mentioned people who wanted to control him, who wanted to own his music catalog. He said he felt like a prisoner. And then he said something that sent chills through everyone who heard it. He said, "They're going to kill me for this." Who was he talking about? Some believe he meant AEG, the concert promoters who had everything to lose if he canceled. Others think he was referring to powerful figures in the music industry who wanted control of his Sony/ATV catalog, which included the rights to Beatles songs and was worth billions. There are even theories that he meant shadowy figures tied to intelligence agencies or organized crime. But the most terrifying part isn't who he was afraid of. It's that he knew. He knew something was coming, and he couldn't stop it. 3 days later, Michael Jackson was dead. Dr. Conrad Murray called 911 at 12:21 p.m. on June 25, 2009. He claimed he found Michael unresponsive in bed. Paramedics arrived and tried to revive him, but it was too late. Michael was pronounced dead at 2:26 p.m. at Ronald Reagan UCLA Medical Center. The official cause of death was acute propofol intoxication, but the circumstances surrounding his death raised more questions than answers. Why did Murray wait so long to call 911? Why did he spend time making phone calls and cleaning up the room before getting help? Why was there no proper monitoring equipment if he was administering propofol? And why were there so many other drugs in Michael's system that day? The toxicology report showed lorazepam, midazolam, and traces of other sedatives. It looked less like medical treatment and more like someone was trying to knock him out permanently. Conrad Murray was eventually convicted of involuntary manslaughter in 2011. He served less than 2 years in prison. The prosecution argued that his gross negligence caused Michael's death. The defense tried to claim Michael administered the fatal dose himself, but the jury didn't buy it. Murray was responsible. But was he the only one? The civil trial that followed revealed even darker details. Michael's family sued AEG Live, claiming the company pressured Michael to perform, despite knowing he was too sick. Emails between AEG executives showed they were aware of Michael's deteriorating condition, but pushed forward anyway. One executive wrote, "We cannot be forced into stopping this," which MJ would try to do because he is lazy. Another email called Michael a freak who needed to be controlled. This wasn't about Michael's health, it was about money. The jury ultimately ruled in favor of AEG, stating that while they hired Dr. Murray, they weren't responsible for his actions. But the trial exposed the truth. Michael Jackson was being used. He was a product, a cash machine, and when he couldn't deliver, the machine didn't stop. It just pushed harder. And then there's the phone call, the recording that has never been fully released. According to sources close to the investigation, Michael didn't just talk about being watched. He talked about his music catalog. The Sony/ATV catalog was the crown jewel of his estate, worth over $1 billion. Michael had refused to sell it, despite constant pressure. He believed it was his legacy, something to pass down to his children. But if he died, control of that catalog would shift, and that's exactly what happened. After Michael's death, Sony gained control of his music catalog through a complex deal with his estate. They paid $750 million for the rights, the largest music publishing deal in history. Michael's children, who were supposed to inherit that catalog, now only receive a percentage of the profits. The people Michael feared would take his music got exactly what they wanted, and all it took was his death. Some believe the phone call proves Michael was murdered. They point to the suspicious circumstances, the financial motives, and the fact that so many powerful people had something to gain from his death. Others argue it was simply the tragic result of addiction and a doctor's negligence. But the fact remains, Michael Jackson knew he was in danger, and 3 days later, he was dead. The recording has been kept under lock and key. Legal experts say releasing it could open up new investigations, potentially implicating individuals who have never been charged. Michael's family has fought to have it made public, but so far they've been blocked. The official reason is that it contains private information that could harm his children. But many believe the real reason is that it contains something far more dangerous: the truth. What did Michael Jackson know? Who was he afraid of? And why did he believe they were going to kill him? These questions have haunted investigators, fans, and conspiracy theorists for over a decade. And until that phone call is released, we may never know the full story. But here's what we do know. Michael Jackson was a man under unimaginable pressure. He was being controlled by contracts, by debts, by people who saw him as nothing more than a commodity. He was pumped full of drugs to keep him functional, and when his body finally gave out, the world moved on. His music still plays. His estate still makes hundreds of millions of dollars every year. But Michael Jackson, the man, is gone. And the last thing he said on a phone call 3 days before his death was that they were going to kill him for what he knew. If that doesn't terrify you, it should. Michael Jackson died alone in a rented mansion, surrounded by doctors and handlers who were supposed to protect him. But they didn't. They failed him. Or maybe they never intended to save him in the first place. The truth is buried in that recording, and until it sees the light of day, the mystery of Michael Jackson's final phone call will remain one of the most terrifying secrets in music history. Subscribe if you want more stories the world tried to bury. And if you're ready to go even deeper into the mysteries they don't want you to know, The next video is already on your screen. Click it now